Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm well. I woke up pretty well. I had some trippy dreams. I think the last thing I was doing was eating a cookie. So it
Oh,
felt
that's not bad.
right.
That's good.
How you doing?
Um, I'm good. I am just writing this comment in Earth to Jordy, hashtag care, not cages. Okay, amazing. So now people know what we are doing, and I
Yes.
will pin that. Okay, amazing. That worked. Okay, cool. So thank you so much for taking time to speak with me. I think when we were talking about this um, Care Not Cages artist relief program that we did with the Crenshaw Dairy Mart, um, it was really important that we got to hear from the artists who
Mhm.
gave this beautiful work for us to share with our communities. So thank you for giving your work and also for taking this time. I'd love if we could start, if you could just introduce yourself
Okay.
to those who are watching.
Yeah, totally. My name is Jordi, Jordiana, Jordan.
Oh, did
I
we
think,
lose? I think we
what'd you say?
lost. You there? Okay, cool.
Oh, okay, sorry. My name is Jordi, Jordiana, Jordan.
Oh, I
Also,
just, the connection's a little spotty, but I think we're good.
really? Okay. Um, and my pronouns are they or she. And yeah, I like want to say more, but I'm also like, what is the internet doing? I'm
Right.
kind of
That's okay. Well, we'll get into it.
cool.
Can you talk? Oh, so the prompt for this artist relief fund was Care Not Cages, um, thinking about the many dimensions of what that might mean. But I'd love if you could speak about kind of what popped into your mind when you saw this prompt.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a part of a continual conversation that has that I've had access to through the organizing work locally, um, through BLM and also the Reform Jails initiative, and it was a part of a conversation that really shined light on the continual violence of incarceration and mass incarceration and how that um, is really targeted towards the most marginalized and the most vulnerable Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, queer, trans folks who are kind of funneled into the prison industrial like machine, and that I feel like a part of decolonizing that um, massive system, um, that kind of like took a different shape or allowed for slavery to take a different shape through like the 13th Amendment, I feel like goes hand in hand with my understanding of police and police violence, and violence towards my own body, and the invocation of care and the invocation of healing in a system that is very violent, um, was something that I think was like my main takeaway from like Care and Not Cages.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm curious also, like, it's interesting to be thinking about um, notions of like restriction and death in a time where these themes are very present in so many different ways, whether we're thinking about mass incarceration or detention centers or even the pandemic. Um, and I'm curious if this sort of time of social distancing has impacted the way that you've approached your work.
Most definitely. I feel a good amount of my work before the pandemic and before social distancing, um, was live, was in person. I was doing a lot of performances. I was doing a lot of like gatherings. I was doing like healing facilitation work, like in person, healing justice work, transformative justice work. Um, and all of those opportunities, all of those jobs kind of came to a close. Um, and really made me have to explore the mediums of my art that didn't rely on being in person with people or even collaborating with people. And there are aspects of my art that were like that before, but I feel like I was prioritizing interacting with people and collaborating with people and creating art with others. And now my art is very, very solitary and very much uh, like audio based and written. So I've written a lot more during this cycle of
Mm,
social distancing, and also recorded a lot more audio.
hmm. Okay. It's so interesting to think about like the way, it's like we know how much a pandemic has shifted the way we understand education or healthcare or things like that, but even to understand how it shifts like art practices and community action is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how it really does require this like new wave of creativity.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, not a little bit, but maybe we should focus to the piece that you submitted for Care Not Cages, ASSATA, which for those who haven't seen it yet is a beautiful 8-minute video um, that is full of um, powerful. I think what really strikes me are like the questions that it brings up um, through both the recordings and even sort of the relationship between the movements in the body and the images and the text on the screen. Um, but I would love to start out if you could explain to people um, who ASSATA is and what she means to you.
Yes. Um, the first, my first introduction to ASATA was like in the middle of the street, holding hands with other Black people, like in the face of um, and their cars, in protest about 4 years ago, and I remember like speaking, chanting, shouting the ASSATA quote, "It is our duty to fight for our when we must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains." And it was this invocation. It was this mantra of freedom and of protection that opened the door for me to understand who she was before I even processed it really on a mental level. I felt her spiritually when I needed to feel protected, or I needed to feel safe or grounded. And those words really came to me and rang in my soul and my spirit. And then I read her autobiography and learned about the history of violence within her own body, and her relationship with um, uh, the United States, and her as a political activist, a freedom fighter, and the work she was doing in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and um, kind of how that work painted a target on her body, um, and the violence that took place because of that target and because of that work. So I really stress or ask or invite people to read her autobiography. It's a beautifully poetic dance between like moments of her past and her upbringing, and moments of violence that the state really perpetuated towards her body, particularly in the bodies of people that she loved and comrades in the struggle. But I know her to be a, you know, a Black femme revolutionary, and activist and organizer, for the liberation of all Black people and all oppressed people, marginalized people, in the world.
Mm-hmm. This chant that is so powerful. It was used, actually, it was the last thing that we did at the Four Freedoms Congress back in February.
Mm.
And it was this, it really was like a moment of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's so interesting in your work how it's used as this like moment of shift, where in the beginning, you know, the piece is thinking about belief. You know, it's like, I believe in this and this and
Mm-hmm.
this, and then there's that chant, and then it goes into this recording of ASSATA's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it like, it's so striking to think about, like, you know, this power of collective action and work and duty. I think there's a really interesting, strong sense of duty that it has with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so was that something that you were thinking about as sort of using that as like a shift, or what was the sort of intention of using of that quote in particular?
Yeah. Um, I think when I first heard it and spoke it, and it was always spoken like with other people. It was always like a collective voice that was being heard of these words. Um, and there is a sense of urgency, and there's a sense of alacrity, there's a sense of responsibility, and a responsibility that has to be communal, that doesn't take place in this like voidal space, but that is a part of this greater movement. And I feel like um, where it was placed um, in the piece, it really goes from, you know, ASSATA writing her affirmation and writing what, you know, what she believes, what she sees, what she has seen, um, and kind of propels it and opens the door to the things that were spoken latter in the piece about violences that are perpetuated not only towards her body, but the collective um, Black body and marginalized body, and what duty looks like, and what um, that this is also affecting everyone on the planet, you know, and that there is a
Mm-hmm.
duty to remove chains off of the most marginalized. Like, if one person isn't free, no one's free. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that quote and that like delivery of the quote, particularly because it's so many people, and because it is like a moment of prayer and grounding, I feel like informed what even I was moving with in the piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This idea of the body is also, of course, so present. You talked about a bit about learning about the violence that ASSATA experienced in her own body and
Mm-hmm.
being, and then also with that sort of this violence that is being inflicted on a collective body. But then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, in the piece, there is such an emphasis on your body as a performer, through the movements. What was your intention and sort of like how you moved? Like, did you choreograph it? Was it improvised? What was that process for you?
Yeah, I was thankful how fluid it was. Me and my creative director like met a couple of times before to just like really focus on the container of the piece and the the intention um, of it. And when I gathered it, it was on one day. I think the whole shoot was like, I don't know, maybe 4, 5 hours, maybe 6. Definitely 2 meals. Definitely 2 meals, like a breakfast and a lunch. So probably 6. And um, we got there, and there were about 7 people, I think, on the set. And we gathered in circle and kind of shared where we were at and what intentions we were doing. It was on a new moon, so it was a sense of what we were releasing and also what we were calling in that moment. And we lit the candle that was seen in the piece, and kind of put those intentions into the earth and into the space, and then like hit play on the mix. The mix is called Black Femme Supremacy. It's by Baysploitation, and it's like on SoundCloud. And that the music that I danced to was the intro to this piece. And we played that, in every shot or in every take. We just played it like straight through, and I just danced. It was completely improvised. I just like moved my body. And I think the driving force between me, like moving in that way and processing things, were to kind of alchemize like a lot of the horrors that were stated by her, and the reality of violences that have taken place, like towards her body and towards my body, because of my blackness, because of my queerness, because of my gender nonconformity. And being able to move with those words, and to move with those beats, to
Mm-hmm.
heal and to transform, was a big part of my transition and to release. Hmm.
Mm. Do you ever hesitate using your own body in your work?
um no. That's like a question. I mean, I use my body and know that, sometimes a lot of times I do overextend. A lot of times I do find myself like in vulnerable places. There have been like many times where I've had a big performance and then gotten like really sick. Um, but I feel like right now, my body has a lot of stories to tell, and there are ways in which I know how to tell stories with my body at this time. Um, so a big part of my relationship with my body and my relationship with using my body as a medium for art, and for storytelling, I feel like centers around that resolve, um, of being seen
Mm-hmm.
and being heard, when so many aspects of my body have been invisibilized or have been kept out of the the social norm, have been kept out of the light, and kept off of platforms because of the amount of stories that I've told. So I feel like that resolve to share, in spite of like that pattern around my body, is what
Mm-hmm.
drives me to move through any um, ambiguity or lack of clarity or fear around sharing, around using my body in that way.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm also just thinking about, you mentioned that pre-quarantine, your work was a lot more like performance and
Mm-hmm.
live, when now it's much more, it's like writing and solitary, which
Hmm.
of course is such a different relationship between like your body and yourself to the viewer.
Yeah.
Have you felt that? Has that like sort of impacted your process of making?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the first thing that I noticed and took inventory of, like probably like 2 months in, was the amount of emotional processing that I do through performance. And like individual emotional processing, like for myself, like what happened during the day or what I'm like going through, and I feel like my self-care practice or my emotional release practice has shifted and has changed because I haven't been able to outlet. Performance was always a beautiful excuse or invitation to move or to sing or to create energy where I don't have that catalyzer. I don't have that invitation because there's not like an audience, and I'm like, whoa, well, I have to, I have
Mm,
to move. There's this environment, the stage was set, and now I'm going to, do it however I feel. I'm going to do it, and I release and I move through different emotions, whether that's when I was singing or moving my body or holding ceremony. And now it has formed a relationship with my own autonomy and choosing to move my body, choosing to sing, choosing to ground myself, to stretch, even if I don't have a performance coming up, and that's been an interesting thing to notice.
mm, mm. That's so it's so powerful to think about that even like the sort of the practice and the routine that has to go into like your body as your instrument or your body as your medium. And I feel like as somebody who identifies mostly as a writer, where I can hide behind, the words on a page or a screen and I can edit and I can change or whatever, like it's such a different, just thinking about kind of the vulnerability required to put your body in front of a live audience is really astounding.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, I also so curious as I watched ASSATA, one thing that really struck me was the shifting gaze, where there were moments that were really powerful where you stare directly at the viewer, and others where your eyes are closed, and others where, your head is turned, and I'm wondering sort of what you want the relationship between the viewer and your figure in the video to be.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think that definitely is a part of a conversation with how I was being seen in that moment as well. I'm thankful for um, the people who magnetized around this project that were holding the cameras. Walter Vargas and Jesse Richmond. I'm so thankful that they, like said their intentions and spoke them out loud, and were interested in the piece in that way, to come and arrive and to really hold me and to archive me as I process, like in different ways. And there were times where I would just get like caught up or lost in the sauce of the portal of what I was experiencing, um in a way that felt like I wasn't even being seen, if that makes sense. Like kind of just freeing, being so free that I could just like move like no one was watching me. And then fluctuating between like that sense and then the knowing that there is like another person like there, and that we are having a conversation and a dialogue between us being present in the space. And that was also a big aspect, like really being able to like see myself being seen and to have a conversation with those two people particularly.
Mm,
um and I feel like that experience like gives a more nuanced um understanding of intimacy from the person who watches it. I mean, I watch it and I'm like, whoa, like like I fluctuate between how I'm able to kind of be separate from it and kind of stand as witness, but also be invited as participant.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so.
Mm. Um, the video kind of closes out with this this kind of this back and forth with that kind of lobs always back to this question of, is that justice?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about ASSATA's story, but I would love to hear from you. What do you think justice is? How would you define justice?
I want to preface the my understanding of justice or definition with justice of like the the environment in which this piece was even created. ASSATA, I believe it was 1996. ASSATA was exiled, sought asylum in Cuba, and at the time, the current pope of that time was visiting Cuba, and the New Jersey State Police, the United States government, was released a statement to the pope to basically like pressure Cuba to send ASSATA back to the United States. And I feel like, or this piece, the letter to the pope, the open letter to the pope, was a a description, a transparency, a call, and a demand for the sanctuary that she had found in that space. So there's already kind of this like opposition or this tether that's happening between like what justice looks like even within her case, um, that definitely shines light for me and illuminates for me what justice looks like outside of what I've even understood as justice and what images have been programmed into me to understand what justice is. Whenever I think of justice, I think of the justice system, I think of judges, I think of the state, you know, being this kind of pinnacle or the only entity that can kind of serve as bringing justice.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are like, you know, like our fictional characters like superheroes that act outside of the state that are deemed as vigilantes or
Mm-hmm.
are hand in hand with the state that kind of bring this kind of interesting relationship with justice to me as a young being. Like, I feel like those two images were the first images that programmed me to understand justice. Um, but I think justice for me is an ever wavering like processing, or like justice isn't like a noun. Justice isn't this like end place, this, you know, land of milk and honey that we have arrived to and receive everything that justice is said for us to bring. I feel like justice is a verb, justice is an action, justice is ongoing, just as healing is ongoing. I feel like healing is some of the just loudest expressions or images of justice that I have seen. And that's healing outside of even what the state can provide. I've seen, you know, justice being had in, you know, like tears being able to shed, or our hands being able to be held, resources being met. Um, and I feel like it's different for everyone. There's like a individual justice and like a collective justice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, it's a lot easier for my brain and for my processing to start with justice on an individual level to shift the mass consciousness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my focus isn't on the mass justice and more so focusing on the individual justice to affect the
Mm-hmm.
mass justice, not
Yeah.
the other way around.
Right. Right. And there's even this like when you talk about individual versus mass, there's even this like it's like an inner versus outer
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, and you almost need like these two systems to change simultaneously to have like effective, lasting change.
Yes.
Um, but I wanna thank you for taking this time to speak with me, to share some of your reflections and more information on your piece. And I just want to invite if you have any last um, things you wanted to share or
Yeah.
shout outs you wanted to give to offer to our audience.
Okay, bless. Yeah. Follow me. I'm Earth to Jordi. Building up my website to kind of act as another portal to funnel and channel folks to my like places where I archive my artistic practice. One of them is my Patreon, but I have a link tree on in the bio of my Instagram, and I just have a lot of like my things on there, whether that's writing or my website or my shop or art. But I'm really thankful to be able to talk with y'all, and this was definitely one of the like ongoing prayers that I've had for myself, and one of them is like manifesting platforms that I can speak on, and like that will be my voice and my story. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful I was able to do that with you today. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So glad to be a little part of this prayer.
Yes.
All right. Bye.
Bye.